Amandla. Amandla. Forward with our freedom, forward. Forward with our democracy, forward. Amandla. Let us be seated. Program Director, Deputy President of the Republic of South Africa, Shipokosa Paul Mashatile, former President of the Republic of South Africa, Thabo Mbeki, ministers and deputy ministers, justices of the Constitutional Court and Supreme Court of Appeal, judges, president, and members of the judiciary, premiers, members of parliament, MECs who are here present, representatives of Chapter 9 institutions, traditional leaders of our people, leaders of faith-based and community-based organizations, members of the military command, members of the diplomatic corps, distinguished guests and fellow South Africans. Ke dumedisha batho ba haeso ka moka ne laba ko rungula vanhu va ka hina hinkwavo. Groet al die mense van Suid-Afrika vandag. I greet you all in the name of our 30-year-old government. Nibingelela nonke enikhona lapha nabo basemakhaya. Molweni. Ndiyanibulisa egameni likahulumeni wethu. Lotshani. Livukile ikusasa elikhulu. Nditama ulumelisa bathu bothe ngadzina la mubuso washu wa Afrika Tshipembe. Dumelang. Khotsong batho kaofela. Exactly 30 years ago, on this day, freedom's bell rang across our great land. The bell of freedom rang in every city, every town, and every village. The bell of freedom could be heard in Musina, in Thohoyandou, in the furthest reaches of the north part of our country, in the vast expanses of the Kalahari, the Karoo, and Richtersveld. It could be heard in Komatipoort, Ermelo, Tsitsikamma, Ulundi, Durban, and Manguzi on the eastern seaboard of our country. It could be heard in Saldanha, Cape Town, and Kleinsier on the western seaboard of our country. The sound of freedom rang in Soweto, in Sharpeville, in Soshanguve, in Everton, Botshabelo, Umlazi, Khayelitsha, Mitchell's Plain, and Mangaung. It also rang in Kliptown, where the Congress of the People met in 1955 to draft the Freedom Charter that laid out a clear vision for a new and free South Africa. That freedom bell also rang here at the Union Buildings, a place that had been a symbol of oppression and power for more than 100 years. On that day, as we cast our votes for the first time, a great heaviness lifted from our shoulders. Our shackles had been cast off. The shackles that had tied us down for hundreds of years. The weight of centuries of oppression was no longer holding us down. Even though our backs bore scars of the cruel lashes of those who had whipped and subjected us for more than 300 years, on that day, as a united people, we stood tall as South Africans. We watched as the flag of the new South Africa was hoisted for the first time. On that day, we could proudly claim, as clearly stated by President Thabo Mbeki when we adopted our Constitution, that we are Africans. Today, 30 years later, we gather as a united people of all races at the same Union Buildings that once symbolized our pain and our oppression. As we celebrate today, we recall and honor all those who fought for justice, for peace, for freedom in our land. We bow our heads to them in gratitude. We remember the heroes and the heroines whose actions made it possible for us to gather here today as a free people. But we also remember those in other lands who joined our struggle, who too in many ways suffered immensely as they were arrested for demonstrating that South Africa should be free and Nelson Mandela should be released and other prisoners. As they received our compatriots who had been pushed into exile, as their countries were bombed by the apartheid regime for merely supporting a just struggle, as their own citizens were maimed and killed in the rampant bombing and attacks that the apartheid government unleashed on our neighboring countries. We thank them and we dip our heads in great gratitude to them as they made the attainment of this day possible 30 years ago. On this day, we fondly remember Nelson Mandela, our first democratically elected president and the father of our democracy. In his memory, we will continue to work tirelessly to achieve the democratic ideals to which he and many other heroes, such as Oliver Reginald Tambo, Walter Sisulu, Mama Albertina Sisulu, many others who suffered and worked tirelessly to achieve this freedom as they dedicated their lives. Few days in the life of our nation can compare to that day when freedom was born. South Africa, our country, changed forever. It signaled a new chapter in the history of our nation, a moment that resonated across Africa and across the world. After casting his first ballot, President Nelson Mandela described that day as the beginning of a new era, moving from pessimism and division to nation building, reconciliation, and hope. The advent of democracy in 1994 ushered in a constitutional order that is premised on equality, freedom, human rights for all. On that day, the dignity of all the people of South Africa was restored. Over the course of 3 centuries, the dignity of the black people of this country had been deliberately and cruelly denied, first by colonialism and then by apartheid. Millions of black South Africans, African, colored, and Indian, were at the mercy of laws and practices that were enforced to serve the interests of a white minority. Their land was taken away, their assets were taken away, their labor was exploited, their prospects were stunted. Running like a malevolent thread through these many forms of oppression was patriarchy, which placed upon black women the greatest burden. Apartheid was an ideology and a system aimed at controlling every aspect of people's lives. It sought to humiliate and to degrade black people. That we have been able to cast off the yoke of oppression and build a new nation rooted in equality, human rights, is amongst the greatest feats and achievements of modern history. The 27th of April 1994 was a victory for non-racialism, for non-sexism, for human dignity and progress, not just in South Africa, but everywhere. It was a victory for reconciliation. The democratic breakthrough that we achieved was much about liberating South Africans from apartheid, as it was about freeing white South Africans from their prejudice and fear. As President Nelson Mandela said, the system of apartheid robbed both the oppressed and the oppressor alike of their humanity. Before the 27th of April 1994, many believed that our country would descend into a racial war. Many believed that given how deep the wounds of mistrust were, that we would turn against each other, slaughter each other, kill each other. And yet we did not do so. Together we worked hard and with purpose to bring about a reconciliation between the races in our country. We must never let our spirits be dampened by detractors, whether they be abroad or in our own country, who want to diminish what we achieved in 1994 and in the years that have followed. South Africa's democracy is young. Most of the world's more established democracies are over 100 years old. We are just babies. The progress that has been made in a relatively short period of 30 years is something of which we can and should all be proud. In his great work called Revolution of the Aged, the poet Njabulo Ndebele writes, "It is a blind progeny that acts without indebtedness to the past," close quotes. It is only those who willfully will not see, who shut their eyes to progress, who will deny that South Africa today is an infinitely better place than it was 30 years ago. We have established a society founded on the rule of law and the premise of equality before the law. Our country has changed. Barata kapa barati lefatshe lena le fetohile. Naho ba sa zwifuni bangwe elishango lo shanduka na hambi bangasilavi tiko leri la hina a ra fani na tiko leriya a hanya ka rona a hansi ka apartheid. We have built democratic institutions and have read our statute books, our law books of racist and sexist apartheid laws. As the democratic state, we have worked to restore the dignity of all the people of South Africa, particularly the dispossessed, the marginalized, and the vulnerable. Over the past 30 years, we have sought to implement policies and programs that advance equality and human dignity in areas like economic empowerment, education, healthcare, social support, and the provision of basic services. During apartheid, the policies, programs, and services of the state had a strict racial bias and hierarchy. Our task over the last 30 years has been to bridge the huge divides of wealth and opportunity in our country between black and white, between men and women, between urban and rural dwellers. We have done so not only to correct the injustices of the past, but also that we may realize the full potential of an economy in which every person has a stake and in which every person has the opportunity to make a meaningful contribution. Although there have been setbacks, and there have been quite a few, although we have faced challenges both beyond our borders and here at home, our economy has tripled in size since 1994. While unemployment still remains our greatest and most pressing challenge, the number of South Africans in employment increased from 8 million in 1994 to over 16 million now. Through affirmative action, broad-based black economic empowerment, worker share ownership programs, and progressive labor laws, we have brought about transformative change in South Africa's boardrooms and on the shop floor. In South Africa today, more than 500,000 workers are part owners of the companies that they work for. This is about 1 in every 20 workers in the formal economy. The proportion of black people in senior management positions in both government and business has increased many times. We still have a long way to go before we can declare that all South Africans do indeed share in the wealth of their own country. But we have made much progress, and we are determined to do much more. Today, our social development system benefits all, providing vital support to the poor and the vulnerable, women and children. The democratic state has, through its healthcare programs, brought down child mortality, improved life expectancy, and made important strides towards overcoming the HIV/AIDS pandemic. Working together, we have opened doors of learning and culture. We have invested in improving and building new schools, new colleges, and 2 new universities. We have vastly increased the number of matriculants, graduates, and young skilled people. Although we have much further to go, we have worked to ensure that poverty is no barrier to a decent education. We have introduced no-fee schools and a feeding scheme in our schools. We have expanded funding to students from poor and working-class families and are now focused on early childhood development. By working together, we have broken down many of the barriers of race and gender, ensuring that all parts of society better reflect South Africa's diverse population. We see this in our classrooms, in our places of higher learning, in government, in our parliament, in our judiciary, in our security forces, and in our defense force. We see the diversity of South Africa in our sports associations, in our religious groups, in our public spaces and businesses, at our embassies, and on our trade missions. In South Africa today, our Bill of Rights is the foundation for a society that is rooted in equality regardless of race, gender, sex, or sexual orientation. Women in South Africa today enjoy full equality before the law. As a society, we have made significant advances in giving effect to the rights of women. We have worked together to ensure that women are empowered in the home, in communities, in society, and in the economy. The women of South Africa have stood up for themselves. They have fought for equal representation in positions of responsibility in the state, in academia, in business, in sport, in the culture as well. Close to half of the members of parliament, the judges on our benches and magistrates are women. More than 60% of the public servants in our government are women. In South Africa today, girls learn alongside boys in our primary and secondary schools and receive equal education. Last year, more girls passed the matric exam and got more distinctions than their male counterparts. That is something to be celebrated. The There are currently more female students enrolled at institutions of higher learning like our colleges and our universities than males. In working to affirm the dignity of all South Africans, we have recognized the different ways in which people are discriminated against and oppressed. South Africa is a beacon for the protections it affords to the LGBTQAI+ community. Although we have much further to go, we have worked to overcome prejudice that is perpetrated against people with disabilities, people with albinism, and many other people in our country who are vulnerable. We have sought to affirm the rights and improve the circumstances of persons with disabilities. We are still working to remove the barriers that prevent persons with disabilities from realizing their full potential and living lives of comfort, security, and material well-being. Centuries of colonialism and apartheid dispossessed black people of their most basic possession, the land. Since the advent of democracy, we have pursued land reform, distributing millions of hectares of land to those who had been forcibly dispossessed and providing security of tenure to many others who had lived on the land of their grandfathers and grandmothers for generations. We have built houses, clinics, hospitals, roads, and constructed bridges, dams, and many other facilities. We have brought electricity, water, and sanitation into millions of South African homes. All those who cast their vote for a better South Africa in 1994 laid the foundation for a democracy that enhanced South Africa's standing in the international community and opened up opportunities for engagement and cooperation. As a democratic country, the new South Africa was able to build alliances, to negotiate trade agreements, and participate in international organizations, and to advance the interests of its people in various of these organizations. South Africa is an important voice on the world stage and an active member of the African Union. We are very much a part of our beloved continent, Africa. We continue to pursue a foreign policy that is premised on social justice in pursuit of peace and a just world order, and that advances the African agenda and the agenda for the Global South. Fellow South Africans, to those born after 1994, the impact and meaning of our democracy is very different from those who lived during apartheid. And yet, apartheid's legacy and its dark shadow continues to cast on our future and defines the choices and opportunities of so many South Africans. We know that despite our achievements, South Africa remains a highly unequal society. Our people confront every day the apartheid legacy of unemployment, of poverty and underdevelopment. Crime, especially crimes of violence against women and children, are a scourge in our communities. Despite great progress, many households do not have electricity or clean water. There are still many families that go hungry. There is a huge divide between the rich and the poor in our country. We see this divide in access to health care, in access to safe transport, and proximity to services and work opportunities. At times, it seems that these challenges threaten to undermine the achievements we have made over the past 30 years. And yet we know that if we work together, if we harness the same spirit of unity that we did in 1994, we will surely overcome these challenges that confront us. History shows us that by working together in pursuit of a common goal, we will and can succeed. Our journey since 1994 has proved that we are a nation of optimism. We are a resilient nation. We are also a nation that has great hope. We believe in a better tomorrow, and it is within our hands to shape our collective destiny. It is within our hands to rebuild South Africa and make it a place of equal opportunity and shared prosperity, where no one is left behind. At his inauguration here at the Union Buildings on the 10th of May 1994, President Nelson Mandela spoke of the realization of our democratic breakthrough. He said that the sun shall never set on so glorious a human achievement. Let us stand together, united in purpose, to build a future where the promise of freedom rings true for every single South African. Let freedom reign throughout our country. Let freedom reign in all the endeavors that we embark upon in our lives as South Africans. We are a country that is full of promise. We are a country that proved to the world and all that we could overcome what the world thought we would never, a racial oppression. We did overcome it working together as South Africans. We can overcome all the other challenges that face us right now. May God bless South Africa and protect her people. I thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. President.